1 hour ago, something happened in Canada that may have just ended the American era in North America. No warning, no leaks, no diplomacy. Canada's Prime Minister walked to a podium alone and delivered 4 minutes of words that triggered a geopolitical earthquake. And 90 minutes later, Donald Trump responded in a way no U.S. president ever has. What you are about to hear explains why the U.S.-Canada relationship may never be the same again. At exactly 2:18 in the afternoon on February 20th, 2026, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney walked alone to a podium inside the National Press Theatre in Ottawa. No aides accompanied him, no ministers stood beside him, no agenda had been announced, no subject matter had been previewed. The press conference had been called with less than 1 hour's notice, and yet cameras from every major network in North America and around the world were already broadcasting live. The room was packed, tense, and silent as Carney adjusted the microphone and looked directly into the cameras. What followed were 4 minutes and 17 seconds that changed everything. Carney read from a prepared statement slowly and deliberately. He did not pause. He did not look up. He did not take questions. When he finished, he folded the paper, turned away from the podium, and walked out without looking back. Within minutes, the clip went viral. It became the top trending topic across social media platforms. World leaders began issuing responses within the hour. And within 90 minutes, the President of the United States had posted a series of messages that transformed an already serious diplomatic crisis into something far more dangerous. This was not a trade disagreement. This was not routine diplomatic friction. This was the public unraveling of a relationship that has defined North American security, prosperity, and identity for generations. What happens next will determine whether that relationship can ever be repaired or whether February 20th, 2026 will be remembered as the moment the American era in North America truly ended. To understand why Carney chose this moment and why he chose to speak alone without warning, you have to understand the 24 hours that came before it. On the morning of February 19th, 2026, Toyota announced that it was redirecting $9 billion in planned investment away from the United States and toward Canada. The announcement sent shockwaves through American manufacturing communities. It was a direct public signal that Canada was now viewed as a more stable, more predictable destination for global investment than the United States under the current administration. President Trump reacted immediately. In a post on Truth Social, he called Toyota's decision a huge mistake. He described Canada as a frozen wasteland with a weak economy that survives only because America allows it to sell products across the border. He predicted that Canada would eventually beg to become America's 51st state. He ended the post with a single word: sad. The message landed in Ottawa like a grenade. According to sources familiar with events that afternoon, Carney convened an emergency cabinet meeting at 3 o'clock. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Several senior ministers urged a conventional response. They advised restraint. They recommended carefully worded diplomatic channels. They warned that escalation could spiral. Carney listened and then rejected that approach. He argued that the era of measured responses had ended. He pointed to broken commitments. He pointed to tariffs that violated trade agreements. He pointed to repeated public insults. He concluded that Washington no longer viewed Canada as a partner, but as a subordinate, and Canada would no longer accept that status. That evening at 6:30, Carney placed a series of phone calls. He spoke with the leaders of the United Kingdom, Australia, France, Germany, and Japan. He informed them that he intended to make a major public statement the next day that would fundamentally alter Canada's posture toward the United States. He asked for their understanding. He implicitly asked for their support. All 5 leaders told him they understood. All 5 indicated they would stand with Canada. This detail matters. Carney did not walk to that podium isolated. He walked there knowing that the core of the Western alliance had already signaled quiet backing. Whatever happened next, Canada would not face it alone. The following morning, Carney briefed his cabinet on the statement. After he finished reading, the room went silent. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland asked a single question. Was he sure? Carney replied that the relationship, as they had known it, was already over. Trump had ended it. He was simply making it official. At 2:18 p.m., Carney delivered his statement. He began by acknowledging 75 years of Canadian policy built around the assumption that the United States was the center of the international order. Canada had built its economy around American markets. It had built its security around the American alliance. It had built its foreign policy around supporting American leadership. That assumption, he said, was no longer valid. He stated plainly that the current administration in Washington had shown through its actions that it does not honor international agreements, does not respect sovereignty, and does not value genuine partnership. Then came the line that stunned the room. Canada will not wait for America to rediscover its principles. The American era, as Canada and the world had known it, is over. Canada is moving forward. He folded the paper and walked out. Great. Continuing now. Full script, paragraph format, part 2. 90 minutes after Carney walked out of the National Press Theater, President Trump responded on Truth Social with 4 consecutive posts that pushed the crisis into uncharted territory. In the first, he accused Carney of effectively declaring war on the United States and vowed that it would not stand. In the second, he announced a complete review of all U.S.-Canada agreements, including trade deals, intelligence sharing arrangements, and even NORAD, the Joint Aerospace Defense Command that has protected North American airspace since 1958. The third post ordered enhanced inspections at every U.S.-Canada border crossing. The language made clear that Canada would be treated as a potential foreign adversary rather than a trusted neighbor. Then came the fourth post, the one that crossed a line no American president had ever crossed before. Trump addressed the Canadian people directly and told them their government was failing them. He said they deserved better leadership, and he stated that the United States would welcome any Canadian province that wished to join America. This was no longer economic pressure. It was no longer trade brinkmanship. It was a direct challenge to Canadian sovereignty and territorial integrity. Under normal circumstances, such language between two allied nations would trigger emergency diplomatic summits and crisis hotlines. Trump posted it casually on social media. The hours that followed revealed something Washington had long feared, but never fully confronted. America's closest allies were prepared to stand with Canada. Britain moved first. Prime Minister Keir Starmer released a carefully worded but unmistakable statement affirming that the United Kingdom believes in a rules-based international order and in respect between sovereign nations. He stated that Canada's concerns were legitimate. The European Union followed, declaring that it stands with Canada in defense of multilateral trade rules and mutual respect. Australia's Prime Minister affirmed that Australia shares Canada's commitment to fair trade and sovereign equality. Japan's foreign ministry expressed understanding of Canada's position and emphasized the importance of relationships built on mutual respect. These are not peripheral countries. These are America's core allies, and they had just publicly aligned with Canada. What is truly at stake goes far beyond trade. The U.S.-Canada relationship is first and foremost a security partnership. NORAD monitors North American airspace and provides early warning of missile attacks. Canadian radar installations in the Arctic cover northern approaches that American systems cannot replicate. Without Canadian participation, U.S. early warning capability is severely weakened. When Trump threatened to review NORAD, he was not threatening Canada alone. He was threatening American national security. The intelligence dimension is equally critical. The United States and Canada are founding members of the Five Eyes alliance alongside Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. Within this framework, intelligence agencies share information so deeply they function almost as a single system. Terrorist plots, cyber threats, and foreign espionage operations are tracked collaboratively. If this relationship fractures, the United States loses intelligence access it cannot replace. Then there is the border. The U.S.-Canada border stretches more than 5,500 miles. It has functioned for generations on trust. Communities on both sides are economically intertwined. Millions of jobs depend on cross-border trade. If Trump follows through on treating Canada as a hostile power, trade slows. Border delays grow, supply chains break, prices rise, communities suffer almost immediately. Inside Washington, the federal government is in turmoil. Pentagon officials are reportedly scrambling to contain the damage. Senior military leaders understand that weakening NORAD and intelligence cooperation endangers American lives. Career diplomats at the State Department are trying to open back-channel communications with Ottawa, but their efforts are undermined by the president's public threats. Congressional leaders from both parties issued a joint statement calling for calm and dialogue. But Congress has no authority to stop a president from altering border policy or initiating agreement reviews. Their statement was a plea, not a safeguard. In Ottawa, Carney's government is preparing for multiple scenarios. Canada has placed its military on heightened readiness as a precaution. It is accelerating trade and security discussions with Europe and Asia. The message is clear. If the United States no longer treats Canada as a partner, Canada will build a future that does not depend on America. 3 broad paths now exist. The first is de-escalation. Quiet diplomacy cools tensions. Some rhetoric is walked back. Limited compromises are made. Cooperation resumes, but trust remains damaged. The second is prolonged cold conflict. Tariffs remain. Cooperation shrinks. Intelligence sharing is reduced. NORAD continues at minimal levels. The relationship becomes transactional and tense. The third is rupture. Formal suspension of security cooperation. Border militarization. Canada pivots toward European security arrangements. America's alliance system fractures. None of these outcomes leave the world safer. Mark Carney stood at a podium and said the American era is over. Trump responded by suggesting Canadian provinces join the United States. America's closest allies sided with Canada. The Pentagon is alarmed. Diplomats are scrambling. History is unfolding in real time. The question is no longer whether the U.S.-Canada relationship has changed. It already has. The only question now is how much worse it becomes. The world is now entering the most dangerous phase of this crisis. Not the explosion, not the shock, but the adjustment period. This is the stage where governments quietly decide what kind of future they are preparing for, whether they believe this rupture is temporary or permanent. Inside the Pentagon, contingency planning has accelerated. Military planners are modeling scenarios that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Not because anyone expects war between the United States and Canada, but because responsible defense institutions must prepare for worst-case breakdowns in cooperation. If NORAD coordination weakens, the United States must fill massive radar and early warning gaps on its own. That takes years. It costs hundreds of billions of dollars, and it still cannot fully replace what Canada provides today. At the same time, U.S. intelligence agencies are reassessing how deeply they can rely on Canadian data flows. Five Eyes was built on absolute trust. That trust is now under stress. Even small reductions in intelligence sharing create blind spots. Blind spots invite miscalculation. Miscalculation leads to catastrophe. In Ottawa, planning is focused on insulation. How quickly can Canada redirect trade? How fast can European and Asian investment replace American capital? How much domestic production capacity can be expanded? These are not theoretical questions. They are active policy tracks. Canada is accelerating negotiations with the European Union, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. Energy export corridors toward Europe are being prioritized. Critical minerals processing is being scaled domestically. Defense procurement is being diversified away from sole reliance on U.S. suppliers. This is what decoupling looks like in real time, not dramatic headlines, not mass announcements, as quiet structural shifts. For the average person, the consequences will arrive slowly at first. Prices drift upward. Supply chains become less predictable. Certain goods take longer to arrive. Some jobs disappear. Others appear in new sectors. Then the political effects follow. Canada becomes less willing to align automatically with U.S. foreign policy positions. Votes at the United Nations diverge. Joint military deployments become rarer. Diplomatic coordination weakens. America, for the first time in its modern history, begins to experience what it feels like to be treated as optional. That is the real meaning of Carney's statement. Not hostility, optionality. For decades, U.S. leadership rested on the assumption that allies had no viable alternative. That assumption is collapsing. The United States remains powerful. But power is not just weapons and money. It is trust, predictability, reliability. Those currencies are being depleted. Three broad futures now sit in front of North America. The first is managed repair. Cooler heads prevail. Trump softens his rhetoric. Back-channel negotiations restore partial cooperation. The relationship never returns to what it was, but it stabilizes. The second is prolonged cold rupture. No formal break, no open hostility, just permanent distance, reduced cooperation, minimal trust, a slow drift apart. The third is structural realignment. Canada fully embeds itself within a Europe-Asia-centered economic and security network. The United States becomes one partner among many, not the central pillar. None of these futures resemble the past. History will likely mark February 20th, 2026 as the moment illusion ended. The illusion that geography guaranteed friendship. The illusion that shared history guaranteed loyalty. The illusion that power guaranteed obedience. Mark Carney did not create this moment. He named it. Donald Trump did not invent global realignment. He accelerated it. The American era did not end with a single speech. But on that afternoon in Ottawa, the world heard a Western leader say out loud what many had been thinking quietly for years. And once something is said out loud, it cannot be unsaid. The age of automatic American leadership is over. What comes next is still being written, and the United States no longer gets to write it alone.